Hello, curious minds, and welcome to this intellectual journey. Today, we'll delve into the heart of a philosophy that not only shaped a nation, but structured the psyche of an entire continent for over 2,000 years. We're talking about a man who sought order in absolute chaos. Before we begin, a quick note. To bring this narration to life, I've used artificial intelligence tools to generate the images you see. Think of them as a canvas, a way to illustrate the ideas and atmosphere of our story. They won't always be literal representations, but rather a visual accompaniment to let your imagination soar with me. I sincerely hope you enjoy it. Imagine a world falling apart. This isn't a metaphor. We're talking about China in the 6th century before Common Era. The ancient Zhou dynasty, which once guaranteed peace and stability, had fractured into dozens of feudal states in perpetual war. In this period, known as the Spring and Autumn period, loyalty was a distant memory, and betrayal was the prevailing currency. Sons killed their fathers for the throne, and ministers usurped the power of their kings. The moral fabric of society had completely unraveled. It's amidst this darkness that Confucius was born, whom we know by his Latinized name, Confucius. He wasn't a mystic meditating on a mountain, nor a prophet hearing divine voices. He was, above all, a man concerned with the survival of civilization. Confucius believed the solution to chaos wasn't in new inventions or harsher laws, but in the past. He saw himself not as a creator, but as a transmitter of ancient wisdom that people had forgotten. His mission was to restore lost harmony. To understand his thought, we must remove our Western modern glasses. Confucius didn't seek individual freedom as we understand it today. His fundamental question wasn't, what do I want? But rather, how do I fit into the web of relationships that sustains the world? His life was, in many ways, a series of political failures. He traveled from court to court, offering his services to various dukes and kings, attempting to convince them to govern through virtue rather than brute force. Almost no one listened to him. However, his political failure became his triumph in education. Unable to change rulers, he decided to change future leaders. He became China's first private teacher, accepting students regardless of their noble or common origin. Let's begin to dissect his ideas. The first pillar, and perhaps the most important, is the concept of Ren. It's often translated as benevolence or humanity, but the Chinese character for Ren is composed of two parts, the symbol for person and the number 2. This is crucial. Ren literally means the relationship between two people. You cannot be human in isolation. Your humanity only manifests when you interact with another. For Confucius, the hermit who isolates himself is not virtuous because he has renounced the playing field of morality. Ren is that sensitivity to the pain and joy of others. It's what prevents us from being indifferent. When Confucius formulated what we today call the Golden Rule, he did so in the negative. Do not do to others what you would not want done to yourself. But how is this benevolence practiced? Here enters the second key concept, often misinterpreted in the West, Li. We translate Li as ritual, ceremony, or propriety, but don't think only of incense and temples. Li encompasses everything from grand sacrifices to ancestors to the way you greet your neighbor or hold your teacup. It's the grammar of social life. Confucius saw ritual not as an empty restriction, but as the channel through which humanity flows. Imagine you have a feeling of respect towards someone. That feeling is invisible, it's internal. Li, the ritual, gives it a physical form, a bow, a handshake, a gift. Without ritual, our feelings remain trapped or come out awkwardly. Confucius warned that Li without Ren is empty. A ritual performed without genuine feeling is just theater. But feeling without ritual is wild and unpredictable. We need both, sincere emotion and the proper way to express it. This leads us to one of his most fascinating ideas, the rectification of names, or zhengming. Confucius believed that social chaos began when words lost their meaning. If a ruler does not act like a ruler, he does not deserve that name. When the Duke of Qi asked him about government, Confucius replied with a sharp phrase, "Let the ruler be a ruler, the minister be a minister, the father be a father, and the son be a son." It seems like a tautology, but it's a profound ethical demand. It means that each social role carries a specific responsibility. It's not enough to have the title of biological father. You must act with the protection and guidance that defines a father. If you fail to fulfill the duty of your name, you are contributing to the chaos of the world. And speaking of fathers and sons, we arrive at the emotional engine of Confucianism, Xiao, or filial piety. For Confucius, the family isn't just a group of people, it's the moral laboratory where we learn to be human. It's the root of all virtue. If you cannot respect and love those who gave you life and cared for you when you were helpless, how could you respect a stranger or be loyal to a state? Morality expands in concentric circles, always starting at home. Filial piety is not blind submission. Confucius said that if a father is committing a moral error, it is the son's duty to gently and respectfully warn him. True loyalty implies wanting the other person to be virtuous, not simply obeying unjust orders. From this family foundation emerged the 5 constant relationships that structure society: ruler and subject, father and son, husband and wife, elder brother and younger brother, and finally, the only relationship among equals, that of friends. You'll notice that 4 of these 5 relationships are hierarchical. Confucius didn't believe in abstract equality. He believed in differentiation. Each person has a place, and harmony arises when the superior cares for the inferior, and the inferior respects the superior. Now then, who is responsible for maintaining this delicate balance? Here's where Confucius introduces his ideal person, the Junzi. Traditionally, this term meant son of a lord, a noble by birth. Confucius gave it a revolutionary twist. For Confucius, the Junzi isn't noble by birth, but by character. He is the gentleman, the superior person, the exemplary individual. Anyone, through education and constant effort, can become a Junzi. It's an aristocracy of the spirit, not of blood. The opposite of the Junzi is the Xiaoren, the small or petty person. The Xiaoren seeks personal benefit, immediate gain, and partisanship. The Junzi seeks justice, what is right, and the common good, even if it costs him his own comfort. The path to being a Junzi is arduous. It requires constant self-cultivation. Confucius said, "At 15, I set my heart on learning. At 30, I stood firm. At 40, I had no doubts." It's a lifelong process. This self-cultivation is vital because for Confucius, politics is simply an extension of ethics. If the ruler is a Junzi, if he is virtuous, he won't need to use force or cruel punishments to maintain order. His very presence will transform the people. He used a beautiful metaphor for this. The virtue of the ruler is like the wind, and the virtue of the people is like the grass. When the wind blows, the grass inevitably bends. Moral leadership is contagious. Conversely, if you try to govern only with laws and punishments, people will learn to evade the law and have no shame. But if you govern with virtue and ritual, people will have a sense of shame and correct themselves. It's the difference between external obedience and internal conviction. Confucius placed an immense burden on leaders. If there's crime and poverty in the state, the ultimate blame rests on the ruler's lack of virtue. There's no room for excuses. Power isn't a privilege for enjoyment, it's a burden of absolute service. This political vision was radical. In an era of tyrants and warriors, Confucius proposed that the legitimacy of power came from morality, not military force. That's why his advice often proved irksome to dukes who only wanted to expand their territories. One of the most interesting aspects is his view on education. Confucius was a pioneer of meritocracy. He said, "In teaching, there should be no distinction of classes." He believed in the transformative potential of study for any human being. But for him, studying wasn't about memorizing facts. It was about learning to be. Learning poetry to sensitize the spirit, learning history to understand destiny, learning music to harmonize emotions. Education was the building of character. Music, in fact, held a special role. For Confucius, music reflected the order of the universe. Harmonious music promoted a balanced state of mind, while jarring or chaotic music could corrupt the hearts of people, and thus of the state. Despite his emphasis on tradition, Confucius wasn't an unyielding traditionalist. He knew that rituals could change over time, as long as their essence was maintained. What was important wasn't the rigid form, but the spirit of reverence dwelling within it. Let's talk now about what Confucius kept silent about. He rarely spoke of God, spirits, or the afterlife. When a disciple asked him about death, he replied, "If you do not yet understand life, how can you understand death?" His focus was resolutely humanistic and earthly. He didn't deny the divine, he simply believed that our primary task is here, with the living solving the problems of this world. Respect the spirits, but keep them at a distance, that was his maxim. Towards the end of his life, Confucius returned to his home state of Lu. He felt like a failure. The world was still at war, rulers remained corrupt. He died believing his philosophy had fallen on deaf ears, buried by the clangor of swords. How wrong he was. His disciples compiled his sayings and conversations into a book we know as the Analects. This fragmented and sometimes cryptic text would become the cornerstone of Chinese culture. During the Han Dynasty, centuries after his death, Confucianism was adopted as the official state ideology. A system of imperial examinations based on his texts was created. To be a public official in China for 2,000 years, you had to know Confucius. This cemented a society where intellectual power was above military power, at least in theory. The scholar, the man of letters, became the social ideal, displacing the warrior, something almost unique in the history of great civilizations. However, Confucius's legacy has also been criticized. He's been accused of fostering authoritarianism, relegating women to a secondary role, and hindering innovation by always looking to the past. These criticisms have merit and are part of the modern debate, But to reduce Confucius to a tool of oppression is to ignore the depth of his humanism. His insistence that government must serve the people and that leaders must be judged by their morality is an eternally revolutionary message. In today's world, hyper-connected yet fragmented, where social forms dissolve and individualism reigns supreme, Confucius's voice asks us uncomfortable questions. Have we forgotten the art of relating? Have we lost the ritual that humanizes us? His idea that freedom isn't in doing what one wants, but in mastering one's desires to serve the common good, clashes head-on with our contemporary culture. And perhaps that's why it's so necessary to listen to him. Like a counterbalance, a different mirror. The concept of Ren reminds us that empathy isn't a luxury, it's a survival necessity. The concept of Li reminds us that forms matter, that courtesy is the lubricant that prevents the social machinery from catching fire due to friction. Confucius teaches us that society isn't a contract between strangers, but a large extended family. That every act, however small, reverberates through the web of humanity. That cultivating our own character is the first step to fixing the world. We don't need to agree with all his answers to value his questions. The search for a social order based on kindness and mutual respect is a project that never ends. It's the architecture of the human soul. So the next time you greet someone, uphold a family tradition, or pause to consider how your actions affect your community, remember the old master of Lu. Unknowingly, you're walking the paths he laid out. Confucius's thoughts survived the book burning of the first emperor, revolutions, invasions, and dizzying modernity. It survived because it touched an essential fiber of our nature, our desire to belong and to live in harmony. I hope this journey through Confucius's fundamental ideas has given you a new perspective on what it means to be human in society. Don't forget that ancient wisdom is often the freshest news. Now I want to hear from you. Which Confucian concept do you think is most needed in today's world? Ren benevolence or Li ritual? Let me know in the comments. I love reading your reflections. Let's delve a little deeper into the psychology of the Yunzi before we finish. Confucius said that the superior man is dignified but not proud. The inferior man is proud but not dignified. This distinction is subtle yet powerful. Dignity is born from internal confidence in one's own virtue. It doesn't need external applause. Pride, on the other hand, is fragile. It depends on the validation of others. The Junzi has an internal center of gravity. The Xiaoren is a leaf in the wind of public opinion. It's also vital to understand the concept of shu, or reciprocity. When Confucius was asked for a single word that could guide an entire life, he said, "Is not reciprocity such a word? It's the ability to infer the desires of others from one's own." This elevates Confucian morality above a simple code of rules. It's not about following a manual, but about using one's own human experience as a compass. If something hurts me, I assume it will hurt my sibling. It's an ethics of imagination. Returning to politics, Confucius had a deep aversion to litigation. He said, "In hearing lawsuits, I am like anyone else. What is necessary is to make it so that there are no lawsuits." His ideal wasn't to win court cases, but a society where conflicts dissolved through mutual agreement. This explains why, traditionally in East Asia, mediation and compromise are valued more than absolute legal victory. Winning by humiliating the other isn't a real victory because you sow the seed of resentment and future revenge. Confucius was also a realist about human nature. He knew that perfection is unattainable. Even he himself admitted his flaws. He said, "If I were given a few more years, 50, to study the I Ching, I might become free from great errors." This humility is key. The wise person isn't one who knows everything, but one who knows the limits of their knowledge. To know what you know and to know what you don't know, that is true knowledge, a vital lesson in our age of misinformation and arrogance. Another interesting point is his view on wealth. Confucius didn't condemn wealth itself, but he did condemn ill-gotten wealth. "Wealth and honor obtained unjustly are to me as floating clouds," he said. "Material things are ephemeral. Integrity is eternal." But if wealth can be obtained by moral means, he didn't reject it. In fact, he recognized that it's difficult to be virtuous on an empty stomach. Good governance must first enrich the people, and only then educate them. Pragmatism and idealism go hand in hand. Confucius's legacy extended beyond China. Korea, Japan, and Vietnam deeply absorbed his teachings. In each country, Confucianism adapted, blending with local traditions, but maintaining its ethical core intact. In Japan, for instance, the samurai's loyalty to his lord is a direct adaptation of Confucian ethics, albeit with a more martial tint than the original Chinese. The work ethic and emphasis on education in these countries have an undeniable Confucian root. Even today, the so-called Asian tigers owe much of their rapid economic success to this disciplined, group-oriented, and education-focused social structure that Confucius established 2.5 millennia ago. It's a living cultural force. But let's return to the man. It's said that Confucius loved music to the point of forgetting the taste of food for 3 months after hearing a sublime melody. This shows us a passionate human being, not a cold bureaucrat. His life was an incessant search for beauty in conduct. For him, a moral act was also an aesthetic act. Doing what was right had an intrinsic elegance, like a well-executed dance. Ethics and aesthetics were one and the same. Sometimes he is criticized for being conservative, and he was. But his conservatism had a radical aim to preserve humanity in inhuman times. Sometimes clinging to tradition is the only way not to be swept away by barbarism. Let's imagine for a moment that Confucius could see our world. What would he think of our democracies? He would probably be horrified by the polarization, the lack of respect in public debate, and the obsession with rights without responsibilities. But he would also marvel at our access to knowledge. He, who had to copy books by hand on bamboo strips, would see the internet as the supreme tool for universal education, though he would surely warn us about the quality of what we consume. His final message is one of hope. The world may be broken, but we have the tools to repair it. And those tools aren't external, they're within us, in our capacity to love, to respect, and to improve every day. Confucius didn't promise a paradise in heaven. He promised that if we strive, we can build a dignified society under heaven. A society where the elder has peace, the friend has trust, and the young have tenderness. This ideal, the Great Harmony or Datong, has been China's dream for millennia. And though it has never been fully achieved, it has served as the North Star to guide navigators through the storms of history. As we close this analysis, I want you to keep the image of that itinerant, dusty, and weary teacher who never gave up, who believed in humanity even when humanity gave him reasons not to. That stubborn faith is his greatest lesson. Philosophy isn't something one studies, it's something one lives. As he said, it does not matter how slowly you go as long as you do not stop. The path of the Yunzi is open to all of us, here and now. We've journeyed from the chaos of the Zhou dynasty to the ethics of the 21st century. We've unpacked complex concepts, and I hope you now see the world with a slightly more Confucian nuance. If this video has brought you value, if it has made you think, then the ritual of sharing knowledge has worked. I deeply appreciate your time and attention, the most valuable resource you have. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell. It's the best way to support this content and ensure you don't miss our next deep dive into humanity's great ideas. See you in the next video.